Welcome to the Compassionate Capitalist Show. We're going to be talking today about making innovation happen to solve really critical problems that affect our climate and our environment and our ability to live healthy and productive lives. And my guest today, Matt Ward from over at Forward VC, is really very unique and interesting in his perspective about this and why he's doing that. And I'm going to talk to you about that today. So let's get started with talking about Matt, because I know I have a lot of people out there that are either climate entrepreneurs or investors, and so we're back to dealing with this important topic. So since graduating from Georgia Tech with a degree in mechanical engineering, Matt Ward spent the last 10 years in technology, startups, and venture capital. As a serial founder, Matt built and exited multiple e-commerce and media companies, as well as serving as both a business coach and strategic advisor in all things strategy, growth, and fundraising. During his career, Matt had the chance to work in numerous sectors with hundreds of different businesses to help them grow and scale their operations. That's really critical to what he does with climate startups and sustainable startups. Today, Matt is recognized as a climate tech leader and super connector through his work with Forward.VCs, that's the web domain, Climate Syndicate, the Ultimate Climate Investor Database, and the Startup Tank Climate Investor Pitch Show. And about his firm, Forward.VC's Climate Investor Syndicate invests alongside leading climate funds and accelerators in breakthrough pre-seed and seed stage climate startups. And that's like not a lot of folks out there are investing in pre-seed and seed, and it is so critical to the innovation that we need in this space that's being done. So it's like, some cases, and we're going to talk about some of these companies, they're like crazy, really world-class founders tackling big-ass problems in the areas of food and agriculture, construction, manufacturing, commerce, and circular economy, recycling and waste reduction, energy, renewables, transportation, and mobility, and anything with positive climate economics that has an opportunity to massively better our world. That's a lot of sectors that climate impacts, right? So welcome
It
to the
is.
show,
It's everything.
Matt.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Karen. You gotta blush a little bit when the bios and stuff come out. I'm just here to help climate companies kick ass and save the world.
Well, and then okay, let's connect those dots. E-commerce and media to what I consider, and now clearly you do, more noble, if that's a thing, saving our planet and providing a pathway to available clean water, inexpensive renewable power for all Earth's residents within the broad label of green and sustainable. So how did that happen? What was the switch that made
A
you
really long and roundabout story and a bit of ADHD and entrepreneur shiny objectness. So I got early on after graduating from tech. I realized I wasn't working for a big corporate. I got into solopreneurship because I didn't want to work for a big corporate and wanted to rely on myself. Built the top crowdfunding podcast in the early Kickstarter days, only to find out if you're helping people raise money, they have jack to pay you with. I ended up creating my own. I know, right? It was a nightmare, but it worked. I got into Amazon FBA, but while living out in Southeast Asia, started a home and garden company, scaled that up, sold the business. Nothing to write home about from a Silicon Valley perspective, but it was enough to kind of get me on the path to what I thought was going to be a full-time angel investing career. That's another story. So Trump put his tariffs in place between the US and China. The Chinese investor that ran the trade company between the US and China, he disappeared to go save his big company. And now I had most of the earnout from that business sale not actually show up, and decided, okay, what do I do? I'm good at helping companies on the strategy, the growth, the scaling side of things, growth hacking, systemization, basically building and scaling without blowing 30 to 40% of your money on Facebook and Google ads. So that's what I did for the next couple of years. I helped B2B SaaS, D2C companies that, for lack of a better term, sell more pointless shit. And about a year ago, I decided, you know what? I'm tired of just more boosting GDP for the purpose of boosting GDP is not a valuable endeavor. I want to do something that truly matters and has that triple bottom line. I want to focus on climate and making an impact, because in my opinion, there's two tests when it comes to your career. So the first is the grandma test. Can you tell your grandma about what you're doing? And if you can't tell her without being embarrassed, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yes.
And then
Good.
B, the second test. That's the kid test. When you tell your kid about what you're doing or you tell someone else, do you feel that sense of pride and the tingliness? And I'd never had that before. And I decided, screw it. I put so much of my time, effort, personality, and personal kind of worth, so to speak, into career. I'm going to do the one thing that matters the most, and I'm going to be phenomenal at it. And that's Forward VC. That's what we're doing now. We invest in early stage climate companies and help them make the world awesome, or make
Yeah.
the world less terrible, depending on how you look at it.
And for those, just so because those that are listening, it's in the show notes, but it's forward is with the number 4, and then Ward, because that's actually Matt's last name too, but it's also the word forward because we're moving forward. So
Exactly. We
forward.vc.
invest.
So
I got the ego in there, and we invest in companies that move the world
yeah.
forward.
So, I love on your website, you have your investment thesis, the statement. The header is a real attention grabber. Our controversial climate tech thesis, because climate investing will fail if we don't get this one thing right. And then there's some other things on there. And you say, we here at Forward VC believe humanity can and will right the ship. We will curb the greatest effects of climate change, and we will do it not with great acts of war and conquest like the stories of heroes past, but with money, incentives, and innovation. I just that really hit home with me. And in fact, because I over the years that I've been working with angel investor groups, and I ran that angel investor group, and companies would come through and they would have a really novel sort of thing that would impact all kinds of different kinds of climate issues and different kinds of things, and they just could not get really out of the gate well enough, right? And there's so much that we do. This is why we have an election going on here in the US. You might have heard about it, called the midterms. And in our ballot in Georgia, there's 2 tax provisions for what really come down to big AG, big agriculture. One is for an additional tax breaks for cutting down trees. I won't go into the other one, but I voted no because, one, there's already plenty of traditional tax exemptions and accounting rules that benefit businesses in their investment in equipment. And 2, I don't want them to cut down more trees. I want them to invest in alternatives to wood for construction. There are so many good technologies that are languishing, trying to get mass commercialization that can withstand Hurricane Cat 5 winds and the fires that destroy so much of our natural resources and homes built in that areas. It's a paradigm shift for most people and probably many of our audience today. So I want you to share, some of the really incredible, innovative inventions, even the science being developed to address climate problems that you're looking at, that you're seeing. And I know when we chatted before, there was one about this. It was petroleum eating mushrooms or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
mycocycle.
that one blew my mind. So I know you see lots and lots of things. Some of them are ready, some of them not quite ready, and we'll get more into that. But just give a teaser to our audience about some of the just really novel approaches that incredible entrepreneur minds are trying to bring to market to affect that very thing and get it right.
The first thing I would say is in the next 5 to 25 years, there's going to be 5 to 25 trillion easily poured into climate solutions because we basically have to reinvent our entire economy. So if you're looking for the biggest opportunity in the history of the world, it is now, because either we save ourselves or we all die. So we can bet on humanity and be successful, or we can let things be the same and bulletproof our Teslas and go to war and let hundreds of millions drown, etc. But in terms of like cool technology that we're seeing, we see amazing stuff. Mycocycle is the one you were talking about. They're an Illinois-based company, and they've developed and they've trained mushrooms to eat waste from the construction and demolition industry, specifically petrochemical-based waste, to remove the toxins, and then to turn that into new forms of raw material filler. So they're replacing calcium carbonate that would go into traditional building materials, and they're eating the old building materials after you knock the building down. So it's really true circularity of building comes down. What do we do with the rubber? What do we do with the gypsum? What do we do with all of this? Well, we can throw it in a landfill, which is going to poison our world, make us run out of space and have more carbon emissions. Or we can eat it, reduce all of those emissions, and then replace having to create something else. So that's something that's just, we love that sci-fi type technology.
Mushrooms eating and training, like that. Just How does that work?
Well, if you think about it, this is something interesting, but in the natural world, there's no such thing as waste or garbage. Anything that dies then gets re-eaten, consumed, and turned into something else. And we can do the same as long as we don't make materials that are unedible, like concrete, like certain types of plastics, et cetera. Even then, there's more and more startups that are focusing on different ways to recycle really innovative or really problematic plastics. There's another company we haven't announced the investment, but it's coming, and they replace 30 to 40% of the plastic within plastic with ground up plant-based fibers. So you can decarbonize plastic, and then in the future you can mix that with traditional fully bioplastic plastics and have a plastic that has no petrochemical content, net zero, or even better, net negative carbon emissions, and has the same type of performance as traditional plastics. The thing is, all of the technology, it's out there, it's being created. It really is the incentives to, like you said, make things happen. Why do we still have subsidies for fossil fuels and bullshit like that, when we could replace, if we shift those subsidies to subsidies for actual things that impact our future, we get rid of bad jobs, we create good jobs that are less pollutive, that are healthier, that have better job prospects, more income, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We invested a couple of months ago in Exion. They're poised to change the world if it really does work out. So they are very early, and we do look at companies that are very early. We'll do later stuff as well, so pre-seed and seed. But with these guys in particular, the problem with batteries right now, lithium-ion batteries, you can't charge them very fast. So you can charge your Tesla in like 8 hours. If you try to go faster, it just degrades the battery over time, which is why your cell phone lasts like a year or two before the battery's dead. And they blow up because if you try to charge them too quickly, incredibly problematic. And the lithium, cobalt, et cetera, that's needed for them, those are coming out of the Congo and other places that are getting ravaged and highly pollutive. Well, these guys have created a supercapacitor based system. They can charge within minutes instead of hours, and they can do it 30,000 times without the batteries degrading. So instead of you replacing your iPhone every year because the battery no longer works, just multiply that times 30. And that's the kind of stuff that we can do. Bird could get rid of 65% of their scooters because that's how much time we waste just charging the batteries. Well, if you can charge immediately, who's ever thought about the range anxiety of owning a pickup truck? No one, because they can drive, they can go, they get some gas, they fill up, they take a piss, and they fill their car with gas. Well, it's the same deal. If you can charge your car in 5 minutes, then it doesn't matter how far your tank can take you or how big your battery is. Right. It's just transportation.
So a lot of what you just talked about, I think some people that are listening might go, well, that sounds like, how can a guy with an idea come up with that stuff and prove that it works? Because we get people that file patents, but there's no proof that it works, right? And so are these coming out of universities? Because people think, oh, that's a university thing, or that's big company that's got an R&D department that's doing it, or it's some kind of government SBIR grant that's doing this stuff. Are all those programs helping to do this, or is this just really incredibly intelligent and thinking outside the box entrepreneurs that are able to figure these things out? Or is it a little bit of everything?
It's a little bit of everything. So the battery company, that's out of one of the top research institutions in Israel. The mushroom company, that's a lady. She was one of the leaders kind of in the construction space, and then got big into sustainability and just wanted to find a solution and said, damn it, how the hell do we make this happen? The plastics one, the founder went over to he went over to, where was it, Myanmar. There was a major refugee crisis there. China wanted to build a pipeline and was kicking people out of their ancestral homes. He went over there, ended up creating a documentary, and met a Bangladeshi plastics genius who would figure out a way to grind up pretty much anything thicker than grass and put it in plastic and still have it perform like plastic. We see some folks that are coming out of industry. We see some coming out of accelerators or incubators. We see other folks that are just looking at a more innovative or smarter way of doing things. How can we put sustainability into the business models? Why do we need a new package every time we have a deodorant? Or why do, when you buy something at the grocery store, it need all of this cardboard and packaging? Why, when, I mean, it's basically everything. If you think about things not only in terms of pure ROI perspective, but also there are two ways to make more money. You can make more money or you can spend less money. And looking for the ways where we can spend less and cut back on certain things is a great way to make more money without needing infinite growth, because there's only one thing in the universe that grows forever, and that's cancer, and then it kills you.
Okay. That's a somber note. Yeah. So let's talk about how this fund and how it works a little bit for folks out there. You've
So
got
technically, we're not a fund. We're a
not a
syndicate.
fund,
I
a
need to say
syndicate.
that,
Okay, so
although
that's
there
why I
may or may
said,
not be evolution happening in the syndicate. So if you wanted to kind of see what we do, none of this is solicitation, but we're at forward.vc. We
yeah,
invest in companies that move the world forward, and there are some big news coming in the future about
yeah.
certain
So
updates.
not a fund. So that's a good question. So why invest in a syndicate versus direct sourcing and investing in startups? You know, I'm thinking less time and commitment, different from the proverbial angel group. And then even then, compared to some people will go and just plant their money in a fund, which I think, guess, you know, my perspective, syndicates give you more control over what you invest in. But from your perspective, talk about, why invest through a syndicate versus a structured group or a fund or individually.
Well, I would say individually is pretty straightforward. A, you probably don't have the experience of evaluating a ton of companies. B, deal flow wise, unless you're seeing, I mean, with us at the startup tank, we're seeing 100 awesome climate companies a month, and then evaluating the ones that we want to work with, the ones that we see massive potential on, the ones where we can find co-investors. We kind of have the partners and network built out. So companies are coming to us and giving us better terms than other VCs because we can bring significantly more to the table. I've basically spent the last year connecting with 1,000+ funds, incubators, accelerators, and CVCs in the climate space, as well as another couple hundred corporates, other players, and then maybe 4,000 or 5,000 angels, with the goal of being the most connected player in the space. Basically, what we do in my model that I say to startups is, if you can save us 100, 200K in the round, we won't be the biggest check, but you can be damn sure we're going to be the biggest hustler, the biggest connector, introducing you to investors, to corporates, etc. And that's kind of where we're headed with evolution of the syndicate, is an accelerator type model. Why syndicate versus a fund? I think it does make sense to be an LP in a fund. If you've got 100, 250, a million to put into as a kind of minimum ticket size, by all means go for it. In a syndicate, or at least with our syndicate, our minimum is 3,000 per investment. Again, none of this is solicitation. You would have to come look and see what we're doing to find out more about us. But syndicates are a great way to learn, just in general, to see more deal flow, to see what syndicate leads are calling good, important deals. And just in terms of kind of terms, most angel groups are relatively slow. They only see things that are local, and they also move. They don't get kind of priority terms because, again, they're slow. They kind of only see things that are local. They don't have the major networks behind them to really assist the companies. For a syndicate, or at least from the perspective of Forward VC, we see the companies. We've got the network. We do the diligence. And then we cheat on the back end in that we make sure the company wins by introducing them to the corporates and getting them the pilots and getting them the follow-on investors.
I think that is really a huge difference between most traditional angel networks, because part of the reason why so many companies in that proverbial, 10 companies that you get, where you got 3 that fail, 3 that do okay, 2 that do pretty good, and 1 that hits it out of the park and makes it up for all difference, right? That's everybody's formula. But the reason why you have those 3 in the middle, and maybe even some that fail, is because the money that the angel group puts in is not enough to take them all the way to the finish line. And they don't really work on all those additional types of the additional types of what you need for a company to scale. And I think, this kind of hands-on approach that Forward VC is doing with, you knowing how to commercialize and get and grow companies and scale and being able to apply that. I had a similar podcast conversation a couple of weeks ago with a similar company out of India doing, that was focusing on that. And their whole thing was really taking them all the way through, and not seed funding, and because of their network and your network, the rest of it. And so, I mean, to me, knowing that you've got that kind of pipeline before and after, during, whatever, plus the resources, it reduces the risk significantly than investing in, just what a traditional model is.
Basically, if you're not cheating, you're not playing the game right, because it's not cheating, it's actually helping. And I won't say that we're an accelerator yet, but you can kind of read in between the tea leaves of where we may be headed for the future.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the size, right? And so the average accredited angel investor in the US is 25,000. So clearly there's a lot of 10,000s and a few 100,000s that make up that number. But we have many new investors, based on age, millennials, income and assets. They're not accredited, that want to invest less simply because of the liquidity. And so they can actually take an active play in your network, in your syndication.
Depends. They've got to be accredited based off of their jurisdiction to be able to be a part of our syndicate or to do
Okay.
these type of deals. There are crowd equity investment platforms. In general, I advise both startups and investors against them. For startups, it sends a bad signal that they basically weren't able to raise from serious investors, which is generally the truth. And because of that, the investors that are there are generally, they couldn't get into the good deals, so they get into the bad deals, and they don't know that they're bad deals. So the valuations are much higher, the terms are worse, the companies are lower qualities. Generally what I see from that perspective, I would say if you're someone who's in this space who's not able to be accredited but wants to do these type of investments, be a hustler and invest your time, find the companies that you love and be an advisor, and then just go hustle your face off and be incredibly valuable for them and get a little bit of advisor equity. Then you don't have to put your money on the line, so to speak. You're putting your time on the line, you're getting a little bit of stake in the company, you can build your portfolio, and then from there maybe you can launch a syndicate, or maybe you hit it big with one of the companies and now the accredited problem is no longer a problem because a big ticket check just hit your bank account, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, in my book, Inside Secrets to Angel Investing, I call them professional angels, because they got professional services to invest in exchange for equity, as when I was defining different types of angels in the book. So, okay, so that's good. So now, just real quick, because I know your syndicate is from people all over the world, because you're located over in Europe, and but you invest in companies all over the world. Is there a different definition of accredited versus, compared to the US?
It is based off of country. So we invest in Europe, North America, and Israel, primarily just because that's where our strongest network, strongest deal flow is. And that's where we have the kind of most insight on the grounds operations. That said, our network is global. So in the US, the definition is, I think, 1 million outside of your primary residence, or 200,000 in income for the past 2 years. In Europe, the numbers are a little bit lower. I think it's 500,000, or there's other specific rules about being considered a professional investor. In the UK, it's even easier. In certain countries, it kind of depends. It goes with the income. It goes with what does it mean to be rich, and it goes with how progressive the countries are. But that's something where we have to kind of vet that with every member of the syndicate that comes in to make sure we're not breaking any rules.
Right. So, and it's dictated by where the company is housed.
It's dictated, yes, but we only take investors that are accredited based off of where they live, because then it doesn't matter where the company is, as long as this person specifically qualifies to invest based off of their jurisdiction. Because
interesting, really.
Mm-hmm.
I just learned something new. So let's talk about, because you put you use an SPV, special purpose vehicle. So talk about the pros and cons of that when it comes to the way investors participate within your syndicate under that structure.
Basically, startups hate individual checks from angels because they're small. They crowd the cap table. They make things complicated. They mean you need lots of signatures. They make everything in life harder going forward. And it means extra legal fees, etc. We set up an SPV. We use Valbon, a pretty established, I guess they're Carta now, pretty established provider. We go through, do the diligence, set up the SPV. Then it's one entity on the cap table. All the investors wire their money into the SPV bank account, which is managed as a trust as a trustee from Valbon. Then the investment goes into the company. The company, i.e., here the SPV holds the ownership, and then we distribute if and when there's an exit or secondaries or et cetera, et cetera. SPVs just make things a lot easier. The cons are there are some setup fees associated, so it has to be a large enough investment to make sense. But in general, an SPV makes things a lot easier for startups and founders.
Yeah. And then do they participate in the return on investment in the traditional exit, or do you do some revenue share things sometimes?
Yeah,
Or
traditional, and then we have whatever our fees are. So investors can choose between a 20% carry or a 2% management fee and a 10% carry.
okay.
And it's just on a per deal basis.
So let's talk about the other side of the table. We've heard about some of these great innovative companies that you're involved in. If an entrepreneur listening right now, what should they be running around in their head and say, and they're in the climate space, about considering applying to your fund and syndicate? What sort of like they should say, oh, I have this or I need this, and then I can apply.
I would say for us, we're looking for three. My kind of framework is I like the three T's: team, TAM, timing. So TAM, is this a massive market, billions, multi-billions, and either growing explosively or enormous and possibly even declining, but super outdated and prime for disruption? Timing, why is it possible now, but wasn't possible 2 or 3 years ago? Because if it was, then, well, why has no one done it? And team, something about the founder, the team just has to be absolutely effing extraordinary. This is the kind of person you'd bet on pretty much no matter what. We like to see defensibility, some type of IP or moats or network effects, etc. What are you going to do have that prevents other people and everyone from doing this? And then we like industries that are not super sexy. So like we said, construction, manufacturing, materials, energy. We're not going for the new hot, flashy thing, the next mobility startup or Uber for yada yada, because everyone's doing that, and if it's overly competitive, that means it's a shitty opportunity. Just to be frank. So
Yeah.
in terms of founders, if they're thinking about applying, you could probably see my little background here. The startup tank, that's our climate shark tank, our climate dragon's den. We do that twice a month. Bring on six pre-seed to pre-series A climate startups. So if you're in that range, be sure to apply. And would love to. We have 2 to 3 climate panelists on there. Our sharks, they're a little bit friendlier than Mr. Friendly or whatever Kevin O'Leary goes by these days. And we've got some pretty cool resources on the site as well for folks who, even if we're not the ideal investor, I mean, our climate VC database, basically I connected with those 1,000 funds, yada, yada, et cetera. Well, we publish the whole thing on our website, just forward.vc/VC database. It's all filterable by stage, sector, geography, check size. We've got Slack groups for founders, another one for investors. Basically, we're trying to be the most helpful people and hope that karma comes back.
Yes. Yes, that's and thank you for that, mentioning that that was going to be part of the closing, but the link is in the show notes for anybody that's looking at it, and you can also see it if you're watching the video on this. So let's talk about the startup tank real quick here. It's because the YouTube channel is going to be listed as well. And so is this a good way for investors to kind of also see the kinds of companies that you're looking at? Because I would guess all the ones in the startup Shark Tank aren't going to all get invested in.
No, they don't all get invested. The nice thing about it, especially for startups, initially it was kind of a favor. They were coming on doing a bit of a favor. Now it's the opposite. When people are coming on, they're getting multiple investors reaching out to them and saying, hey, we need to set up a meeting. We saw you on the startup tank. And that's a cool feeling and a big value add for for the founders. But in terms of investors, these are the types of companies that we'll be investing in. It's not necessarily we're investing in them. There may or may not be some changes coming to the program for Forward VC, and us becoming more of an acceleration type platform. So that could become a bit more of a demo day in the future. All this is hypothetical, of course, and not solicitation, because there's all these bullshit rules about talking about things. And I haven't said anything. I hope that it's problematic there. But in terms of investors trying to understand us and what we do, basically our goal is to be the absolute most helpful player at the table, to connect to the founders to the top corporates, get pilots set up, get traction, and then help them raise larger rounds. And that's if investors think that network and kind of our model of invest, but the big problem with climate, so you brought it up a little bit and then somehow I missed it, but the big problem is in the pre-seed and seed, there's actually a cash crunch. So in the next 5 to 25 years, there's going to be trillions coming into the space as governments started to put capital into things and to fight the climate and sorry, not to fight the climate, to save the world kind of deal. LPs start to divest out of fossil fuels and into things that make them look good and save the world, as more VCs and investors like me decide, hey, I'm tired of doing this Wall Street just derivatives trading. Let's do something that feels good and makes money. As all of those things come in, there's going to be larger and larger pools of capital being deployed into this space. There's one big problem. All those people write really big checks and are really lazy. They can't write small checks. There's no way to put $2 trillion into pre-seed climate companies. It's just not doable. And they want to write big checks because they get big management fees, which means that if you're able to get to those later stages and have some serious traction, if you can survive the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to have unlimited dumb money runway to scale from all of that funding that's coming in, from all of the incentives, from everything that's happening with the IRA, which is very strangely named, Inflation Reduction Act, and all the non-dilutive funding that can come in. We recommend as well for startups, once they kind of get to that Series A, B, C round, you don't need more dilutive funding. There's ways for you to take non-dilutive. So just go get some debt, or maybe not debt these days, or do revenue-based financing or whatever it is, because then you can grow and scale without giving up the rest of your company.
Yes, that is perfect point. And I think that it's so true, because that's the thing I just think about some of the companies that and it's all part of the reason why I have such a passion for what I call the compassionate capitalist movement, in which you're definitely a member of that because of your choices of what you've done from moving where you were in a corporate gig to where you are now. We need to bring net new money back into the marketplace to fund this innovation, because, there's money happens, but you've got to take risk that's aligned with your passions, because you can replace money. You know what I mean? Any investor out there can replace their money. You can't replace time, and you can't replace destruction. And so, it's the kind of thing that I think it's really great that you have targeted to that space, because it's so very well needed. So I want to thank you so much for Matt, for all that you do. And what else would you like to share that we haven't covered?
One very important thing. I wouldn't say this is all just the goody two shoes of let's do good things and save the world, because that's because we want to be good people. As I also said before, we need to recreate the entire economy of the world, or we are all pretty much going to die and go to war. That is the biggest economic opportunity in history. And none of this is financial advice. But if you're thinking about business and don't have a climate perspective to that, does that business really have a future? Or is it going to be killed? And I think the answer should be relatively straightforward on that.
Sure. So that's the capitalist side of it. Capitalists want to make money. So
exactly. And I think we need to figure out the way to align those incentives in place for the right in my opinion, the incentives create the outcome, which is why evergreen funds are much better. And I would be thinking evergreen if I was ever thinking about future iterations of what I wanted to do, because having a 10-year time horizon on things that take a long time, that change the world and become the largest companies that replace the big tech companies of today, does it really make sense to have a 10-year limited window before you have to tell the company to give up? I don't think it does.
Yeah.
I don't think it does. So think long term, think big. If you want to learn more about us and what we do, the startuptank.com, you can find us there. We're on all the major podcasting platforms. Be sure to subscribe. We do the little Shark Tank deal every 2 weeks. If you want to learn more about us and what we're doing on the syndicate and investment side of things and possible future of what that looks like, forward.vc, the number 4 ward.vc. We invest in companies that move the world forward. If you're one of those companies and want to apply, just the startuptank.com/apply. If you liked that idea of kind of being accelerated into ridiculousness, that is all hypothetical, of course, then you can find more information there as well. And yeah, we've got the VC database, lots of free stuff. So yeah, join our newsletter. Hopefully you'll find things helpful. And if I can ever be helpful, let me know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I have subscribed. So, and I'm going to go subscribe to the, I think I already have on the YouTube. So thank you so much for all that you do, and onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards, all the best. And good luck with the midterms, Jesus.
Yes. Thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you.